Hello everyone, and welcome back. Full of life, always cheerful, and truly living her dream. That's how Teba al-Ali came across in her widely loved YouTube videos. To the thousands who followed her, Teba was the epitome of joy, beauty, and bravery. A beacon of inspiration for young women striving for independence. But hidden behind that bright smile on screen was a dark family secret. In January 2023, 22-year-old Teba returned to her homeland, Iraq, for what should have been a joyful family reunion. But instead of the warm welcome she expected, it turned into a tragic end. This is the story of how a father's obsession with protecting his honor led him to take the life of his own daughter, sparking a fierce controversy in a country wrestling with the deadly effects of age-old traditions. Teba's life and YouTube journey. These protesters in Iraq's capital are demanding justice for the brutal killing of a young Iraqi YouTube star, Teba al-Ali. She was strangled by her father in the southern city of Diwania, and the attack is being labeled as an honor killing. Teba al-Ali was born in Iraq in the year 2000, a time when the country was crippled by international sanctions and political unrest. She was raised in a conservative family in Diwania, a southern province known for its rich agricultural lands and deep-rooted traditions. Teba's childhood was shaped by a nation struggling to rebuild itself. As she grew into her teenage years, Iraq was undergoing a transformation, grappling with the aftermath of war and the influx of Western culture through the spread of the internet and social media. For young Iraqis like Teba, this created a complicated world where the old ways often clashed with the exciting new global youth culture. Teba's return to Iraq. By 2017, at just 17 years old, Teba's life took a dramatic turn during a family trip to Turkey. Captivated by the vibrant energy of Istanbul and the tempting promise of freedom, Teba made a bold decision to stay behind when her family returned to Iraq. This marked the beginning of her journey towards independence and self-expression, setting the stage for the tragic events that would unfold 6 years later. In Turkey, Teba created a new life for herself. She embraced the cosmopolitan vibe of Istanbul, a city that bridges two continents and blends tradition with modernity. Far from the restrictions of her conservative upbringing, Teba flourished, exploring her passions and connecting with a community of fellow Iraqi expatriates. It was here that Teba discovered YouTube as a platform to share her life experiences and connect with others. By 2023, Teba had garnered over 30,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel. Her content often highlighted her daily life, her thoughts on cultural differences, and her experiences as a young Iraqi woman living abroad. Her videos particularly resonated with young viewers from conservative backgrounds, who saw in her a symbol of the freedom and independence they longed for. However, Teba's YouTube success wasn't without controversy. Her videos, which frequently featured her Syrian fiancé and showcased a lifestyle that defied traditional Iraqi norms, attracted criticism from conservative viewers. Some accused her of abandoning her cultural values, while others viewed her as a negative influence on young women. The confrontation and tragic end. Despite the happiness and success Teba found in Turkey, her relationship with her family remained tense. Her father, especially, was vehemently opposed to her decision to live independently in a foreign country, far from his control. He was also deeply unsettled by her plans to marry her Syrian fiancé. The joyful posts Teba shared on social media, filled with moments of love and happiness with her partner, only widened the rift within her family. What her followers didn't know was that behind the scenes, a storm was brewing in Teba's seemingly perfect life. In early 2023, as Teba's life in Turkey was flourishing, an unexpected call from Iraq shattered her peace. It was her mother, her voice filled with longing and promises of mending the broken bonds. Despite the years of distance and the painful memories that had driven her away, Teba found herself torn. Her mother's heartfelt pleas awakened memories of family and home that she had tried so hard to leave behind. Teba had already planned a visit to Iraq later that year, with hopes of reconciling with her family. Her mother's call seemed to rekindle Teba's hope for reconciliation, strengthening her determination to visit Iraq sooner than planned. With that renewed resolve, Teba decided to move her trip forward. As she prepared for her journey, Teba was cautiously optimistic. She eagerly anticipated reconnecting with her mother, hoping that time might have softened her family's rigid views. Yet, deep inside, a sense of unease lingered. The memories of past conflicts and the very reasons she had left Iraq in the first place weighed heavily on her mind. To avoid potential confrontations, Teba devised a careful plan. She arranged to meet her mother alone at a close friend's house in Baghdad, deliberately steering clear of her family's home. This neutral ground, she believed, would provide a safe space for their initial reunion, allowing them to reconnect without the immediate pressures of family dynamics. Teba intended to use this meeting as a way to gauge the current family situation and her mother's feelings. If things went well, she planned to gradually reestablish contact with other family members, including her father. By taking this cautious, step-by-step approach, she hoped to navigate the tricky path of family reconciliation while keeping some control over the situation. On January 31, 2023, Teba arrived in Baghdad, her heart pounding as she stepped onto Iraqi soil for the first time in years. A mix of nostalgia and anxiety swept over her as she made her way through the familiar yet changed city. She headed to her friend's house, expecting a private, emotional reunion with her mother. But as she entered the house, her world came crashing down. To her utter shock and dismay, she found not just her mother, but her entire family gathered there. In that instant, Teba realized she had walked into a carefully set trap. The promise of a loving reunion had been nothing more than a ploy to lure her back into the grasp of a family that disapproved of her life in Turkey. The house that was supposed to be a neutral meeting place had become the stage for a confrontation she had desperately tried to avoid. As Teba stood frozen in the room, the atmosphere quickly turned hostile. Her family began berating her for her life choices and for daring to live in Turkey with a man. Despite her attempts to explain herself, her words fell on deaf ears. They surrounded her, cutting off any chance of escape, and then forcibly drugged her, leaving her defenseless and unable to resist. Once she was incapacitated, they bundled her into a car and drove her to the family home in Diwania province, over 100 miles south of Baghdad. Throughout the journey, Teba remained under the influence of the drugs, powerless to call for help or escape. Upon arriving at the family home, a heated argument broke out between Teba and her father. The confrontation, fueled by years of tension and cultural differences, escalated quickly. Teba desperately tried to defend her choices and her right to live life on her terms, but her father was unmoved. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Teba eventually retreated to her old room, hoping for a brief moment of peace. But the worst was yet to come. In the early hours of the morning, while Teba slept, her father entered her room. Driven by what he later claimed was a desire to cleanse the family's honor, he approached his sleeping daughter. In a horrifying act, he strangled her to death. Teba, who had dared to dream of a life beyond the confines of traditional expectations, had her life brutally cut short by the very person who was supposed to protect her. The next morning, Teba's father turned himself in to the local police. He confessed to the murder, attempting to justify his actions as a matter of family honor. He claimed that Teba's independent lifestyle in Turkey and her plans to marry her fiancé had brought shame upon the family. The news of Teba al-Ali's murder at the hands of her father sent shockwaves through Iraq and beyond. What began as a personal tragedy quickly evolved into a national crisis, forcing Iraqis to confront the grim reality of so-called honor killings and the broader issue of violence against women in their society. The news of Teba's tragic death sent shockwaves across Iraq, particularly among women. Although honor killings are tragically common in Iraq, Teba's case struck a deep chord, especially with the youth, both girls and boys, who found her story particularly shocking. Discussing honor killings in Iraq is never easy, and for years, efforts to address this issue have faced significant challenges. As a former MP, I spent a decade trying to pass a law against domestic violence, but every attempt ended in failure. In the days following Teba's death, protests erupted across Iraq. In Baghdad, demonstrators gathered outside the Supreme Judicial Council, holding signs that read, "Stop killing women," and "There's no honor in murder." Many of the protesters were young women like Teba, demanding justice and calling for legal reforms to protect women from domestic violence. Currently, Iraq lacks specific legislation criminalizing domestic violence, a gap that activists argue leaves women vulnerable to abuse and murder. Social media became a battleground of opinions, the very platform that had made Teba a recognizable figure. While many expressed outrage and called for change, others defended her father's actions, highlighting the deep cultural divide in Iraqi society. The public outcry forced Iraqi authorities to address the issue, but their response exposed the inadequacies of the country's legal system in protecting women. They pointed to Iraq's penal code, particularly Article 409, which allows for lenient punishments for honor killings. This article states that if a man catches his wife or female relative in an act of adultery and kills her, he may receive a maximum sentence of just 3 years in prison. A draft law on domestic violence has been stalled in Parliament since 2014, facing opposition from conservative politicians who argue that such a law would undermine traditional family values. Other articles, like Article 41, enshrine a husband's right to punish his wife and parents' right to discipline their children within limits prescribed by law or custom. These vaguely worded provisions have often been used to justify domestic violence and shield abusers from accountability. Despite the brutality of the crime, many feared that Teba's father would receive only a light sentence due to the existing laws. Violence against women in Iraq has long been a concern for campaigners. A 2021 Home Office report highlighted the fact that Iraq lacks legislation to prevent and punish so-called honor killings, and the Iraqi Penal Code allows for lenient punishments on the grounds of provocation or what it describes as honorable motives. However, the law fails to clarify what these honorable motives are. The current Iraqi Penal Code is very lenient when it comes to honor crimes, including murder. Therefore, the proposed domestic violence law needs to criminalize domestic violence, establish a reporting mechanism, and ensure that shelters are available for women. As the public debate raged on, a new development added another layer to Teba's tragic story. Voice recordings, allegedly between Teba and her father for months before her death, surfaced on social media. These recordings, verified by human rights activists, shed light on the long-standing family conflicts that led to Teba's estrangement. In these heartbreaking audio clips, Teba can be heard accusing her brother of sexually abusing her when she was younger. She claims that this abuse was a primary reason for her decision to stay in Turkey rather than return to Iraq. The allegations of past abuse within the family added a new dimension to the tragedy, highlighting the complex and often hidden dynamics of domestic violence. The revelation of these recordings intensified public outrage. Many saw Teba not just as a victim of an honor killing, but as a survivor of long-term abuse who was ultimately silenced for seeking freedom and safety. In April 2023, just 3 months after Teba's murder, her father was sentenced to 6 months in prison for her death. The lenient sentence further fueled public anger and intensified calls for legal reform. Many viewed the short sentence as a failure of the justice system and a grim confirmation of their fears about the inadequacy of Iraq's laws in protecting women and punishing perpetrators of gender-based violence. The response to Teba's death also revealed deep divisions within Iraqi society. While many expressed outrage and demanded justice, others defended the concept of honor killings or blamed Teba for her fate. These conflicting reactions underscored the complex cultural and social dynamics at play in discussions of women's rights in Iraq. For many Iraqis, particularly young women, the sentence was not just a miscarriage of justice for Teba, but a chilling message that the legal system would not protect them if they chose to live independently or challenge traditional norms. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more shocking and compelling stories ahead.